The last time we met, we talked about some of the background about how this was prepared for through some of the popes, some of the theologians, and that the laity have always been involved in the church. But it became more focused in the time leading up to the council. There was a tremendous emphasis on baptism and confirmation, which were the foundational events in a person's life, that by being baptized and being confirmed, a person was then expected to be part of the apostolate, part of the mission of the church. You know, it wasn't just for a select group, but it was for all believers to be part of the work of the church. The laity in this document are portrayed as having two very different but related areas of concern. One is that it is to a large extent given to the laity to bring the message of Christ into the world, into where they live, where they work, to actually be the presence of God and His teaching through one's work. And therefore the church then is reminding people that one's relationship with God, one's practice of religion, is not something that is selective in the sense of it's a Sunday event. No, when one has a relationship with God, and the mission is to bring the teaching of God, the presence of God into the world, a person does it in the situation he or she finds themselves in. For example, in culture today, there is a concern about the respect of life. We see how oftentimes that is compromised, even in our own society. And yet we, as believers, as followers of Jesus, we are called to be spokespersons about that every human life has been made in the image and likeness of God, and every human life from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death is to be preserved. And people are encouraged, and we know that it's not always easy to do that. It's not easy to do it because, first of all, on a very human level, people don't agree with it. And people don't like to stand out. They don't like to draw attention to themselves. For many people, they're very hesitant. And I think that what they were saying in 1964 is even more of a challenge today, because we have a situation today where there is a real sense that in our society we need to be politically correct. Now, politically correct is not the most important thing. I mean, truth is first. Charity, justice. I mean, those are the values, but they're not the values of today's present moment, because, we say nothing about what would upset other people. And so this idea of the laity having a primary apostolate in the world is something that becomes very, very challenging, more so than in other times. Because today in the Western world, Europe, the United States and Canada, there is a real denial of God, and anything that even resembles a relationship society is, leaning in the other direction. And therefore, many people live a very quiet life. They love God. They certainly, go to church. They receive communion and all that. But the church is constantly calling them to engagement, to involvement, to be missionary disciples. That term last week was used many, many times by our Holy Father when he was in Brazil. In those speeches that he gave, he often referred to, you are to be missionary disciples. Now, what was he trying to say? Well, take the two words. Disciples are those who follow Christ. Missionary means that one is doing this in a public way, either in your neighborhood or in a far-off country or any place in between. But that idea of reaching out, of being with people, being vocal, is something very much that Pope Francis is talking about. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, one of his talks, he actually used this image. Now, I would dare say that it could be said of every believer, or should be said, but he was directing it at bishops primarily. And that's okay. That's okay. But his thing was that we needed to get out where the people were so that we could, don't be offended, so that we could, as bishops, smell the sheep. Now, in one way, he's talking about a very powerful relationship, that you can actually smell the sheep, and it's used, in a, not in a literal sense, but figuratively. But, you don't stay in your rectory all day. You go out where the people are. You actually get to know them and hear them and find out what they are thinking. But also, in hearing them, then what message we have to share with them. So it's a two-way thing. We benefit from what we hear, say, as believers, as bishops, but we also can bring a message when we hear what it is that is really uppermost in their minds. What are their concerns? Secondly, however, this particular decree says that the laity also have a very legitimate role in the life of the church internally, not just the external being the presence of God amongst the world and being able to use our gifts in various professions, but that within the church, in the last almost over 40 years now, moving very close to 50 years, what a change we have seen in the role of lay people in the church. When I was young, the only lay people that were really involved were the cook and the housekeeper in the rectory, a custodian who kept the buildings clean and the heat on, and the group of men who were in the St. Vincent de Paul Society. And some parishes had a sodality for women and a Holy Name Society for men. But now, what is the reality that we see, thankfully? By universal law of the church, every diocese and every parish has a finance council made up of lay people who are expert in finances and law and hopefully people who are also versed in construction issues. I never had a course in any of that, to be very honest. I didn't. And priests before me didn't. And so the church is saying, well, look at, that's part of the church. And that's why it says lay people. Not only in the in the parish, in the diocese, but the parishes. I mean, the cathedral here has a finance council. Every parish, by law, is to have one. And when a parish, a pastor wants to do something, he wants to, to put an addition on the church, one of the things I ask is, what does the parish council say and the parish finance council? I want to know if this is something that has the backing of the people. Now, not that the people are voting on it, but it's much more nuanced, but you don't want the pastor trying to build a monument to himself. You want him building something that is needed to carry out the pastoral mission of the church. And so therefore you find out what those two councils had to say. Are they aware of it? Are they on board on this? Or whatever. Also, the lay people today, increasingly, come very well prepared. They come prepared because they, first of all, they love their faith. They want to be involved in the church itself. And they want to, to interact with people. So, for example, here in the diocese we have a program for laity, for the lay ecclesial ministers, who go through a rigorous program of human development, spiritual development, intellectual development, and pastoral formation, and then to be able to be hired by a parish as a pastoral associate or a director of religious education, in charge of bereavement ministry in a parish, to be the youth minister in a parish. All of this now has come about from what this document said. This document, and this document said this not because there was a priest shortage. There was no priest shortage in 1964 in America. Things happened after the council. But the council was talking what I have just shared with you when there was no priest shortage. It was that people, Catholics, can serve in the church in positions of leadership, helping people in their journey through life. And they go through this rigorous program, and today we have a sizable number, say, in our diocese. So that what has happened about the laity is that it's been more formalized and expanded and encouraged, because everyone, through baptism and confirmation, has been given gifts from God. Gifts that can be shared not only for one's own development, but can be shared for the spiritual and pastoral good of people. And that enriches our lives as Catholic communities. Another thing that is really, encouraged is associations. Sometimes, we like to work alone. I'm going to do this, and it's my project. And there's a place for that. There really is. But there's also a place for people coming together with a common faith, a common goal or vision, because there's strength in numbers. And we benefit from the faith of those that we're working with and their input, their assessment. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with a couple of people who were very concerned about those who have had and or contributed to abortions. And that many of those people afterwards, feel very bad about it. And they want, to get over that, to admit it. And the church has had various ministries. One of them is right here in our own diocese. We have an association of the Christian faithful. And now there's a number of people. I had Mass for this group last Saturday at the Center for Pastoral Leadership down in Wycliffe. And there are about 30 people there. And they meet with people who have experienced this. They have days of recollection for them. They bring priests in for the celebration of Mass. There's also an endeavor in the diocese called Project Rachel, where priests have special sensitivity. You're going through a day-long workshop on hearing confessions of people who have had an abortion or have aided in an abortion. Now, that's an association that we have right here in our own diocese, that in many parishes you'll see a flyer, in the book rack, and they get calls all the time. And now they're using a church building in Berea where they meet with people individually. They also have group meetings. Again, it's the laity involved in the apostolate of the church. Sanctification. Helping people get over what they had done, which was wrong. And they know it. Now, sometimes they know it better after the fact. Now, I'm not saying that to excuse them. But sometimes with the passage of years, one has a more mature way of looking at things and say, God, what I did when I was 21, that was absolutely horrific. And now they're looking for reconciliation. They're looking for a strengthening of their relationship, an association. But we have other associations that are on a national level or an international level. For example, the St. Vincent de Paul Societies. They're an association recognized by Rome for the world. And look at all the good that they do in parishes with the poor, those who have come upon hard financial times, those who need assistance in working their way through some of the governmental bureaucracy. And in a parish, in the St. Vincent de Paul Society, sometimes there are several people who know how to do that, and they help them. So it's not just that you gave them a new bed, or you gave them, several bags of groceries. Sometimes it's just going with them to the Social Security office or wherever to get benefits that they're entitled to, but they don't know how to do it. Again, an international association, an association, lay people, that's who is in it. Sometimes pastors are the chaplain, but they're not technically members of the St. Vincent de Paul Society. It is the laity. That's the way it was set up years ago. Rome very much is, in this document, highly recommending that Catholics take advantage of the associations, that they then can lend their expertise, their experience, along with others in being able to help people either in needs of charity, needs of education, or whatever that will benefit people. The document clearly says that while there's a difference, the two are intimately related. The temporal order of life and the spiritual part of life. And so that the laity are called not only to help people grow in their holiness, but they're charged with trying to help the common good. The common good, which is what Almighty God is looking for. And so that document is full of challenges and things that have come together, and now we're seeing the fruit of what was written 49 years ago and promulgated. We're seeing it in our own parishes, our own dioceses, in mission countries, the number of people that are trained as catechists. The priests can't go everywhere. When I speak with our priests who are down in El Salvador, for example, they spend a lot of time with the leaders of the people. Why? Because they're in a parish, the priest, and he's got 32 missions. And so today he goes to one, tomorrow he goes to the next one. He doesn't get back to that first one for 5.5 weeks. Well, that's not a lot of time. It's the best they're doing. I'm not finding fault with them because they're going out every day to a different place. That's not what I'm saying. So what they do at night, they're training the leaders who now have the ability to teach because they have got more attention. More time has been given to them. And they then become very, very important people in the ongoing increasing of one's faith life. And that is all part of what this document has said, that the laity are to be working with the bishops, with the priests, with one another to help the others. And we've seen that increase tremendously in places like El Salvador or any of those other countries where they have got the priests have trained laity to take leadership roles for the good of the big number of people. I mean, if you can imagine 32 missions, and I mean, I went to some of them with them. Some of them you can drive to. Some of them you only drive so far, and then you either walk, you get on a horse, and you go into it. These are not going from Wycliffe to Willoughby, and you get on the road and you go up the street a little bit, and there's another church. It's not that easy. It's a real challenge. And so you have to use what the church has been teaching. You have to use what the church has been teaching to make the presence of the church for the wider group of people possible. So, this document in many ways is one that has affected our lives in a very, very particular way. If I asked here, the parishes that you're from, who is on staff in those parishes? I'm sure that you would point to Mary Jo as, in charge of the religious education. And John is the business manager. And someone else coordinates all the youth activities. And all these people come prepared. It's not just goodwill. It's not just that they want to volunteer. They come because they've gone to school at Ursuline or Notre Dame or at St. Mary's Seminary and got the background in theology and other subjects, which gives them, the competency to do it. It's not just, goodwill. Goodwill's important, but you also have to have some, knowledge and all that behind it.